I can play, that's for sure.
Yeah, and he's doing it without all of the, he's doing it on a Strat, and he's doing it without humbuckers, and he's doing it without all the gain you have these days. He's doing it, with like the old Marshalls where, the levels of gain are really minuscule compared to what we have now. So there's like, you're out there naked with that guitar, and, he's making it really jam. And
And he's making funny faces while he's doing it
he's
too.
always the showman too, and obviously in the first part of that clip, he let that camera live. and,
What's
but
that
the
second?
second one is Cal Jam.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I was gonna say that looked
that's
like the
before he. Yeah, it's before he went off. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, just way ahead of his time,
badass.
and some of the things we've also there's a there's a an album called Deep Purple in Concert 1970 to 1972, and I think there's it's similar from that first clip we just saw, but there's a track called Ring That Neck on that thing where he's like an 18-minute jam piece he does with the band, and he's just playing stuff that for its time is just remarkable. You know, you're talking about like 80s metal levels of shred back in 1970, and it just wasn't seen. So that was that, along with everything else we've talked about his strengths, and also being a brilliant improvisationalist. That's another thing. He's a guy who um, is never at a loss when he's doing improv on the guitar. A lot of the things he does tend to be improvisational because one of the things he talks about in one of his early interviews is he doesn't have a great technical memory for remembering what he played on the record. So, sometimes he'll remember bits and pieces of things like the Smoke on the Water solo, he knows pretty well. But if it's, a very long piece or something like that, he's, a lot of the time you'll see him live, he'll be doing something that was a little different than what was on the album.
Hmm.
So, he's one of those guys who really had the ability to do pretty much everything you want. So we've talked about Ritchie's strengths. One of the things we do in the Alchemy profiles, we also talk about every player's weaknesses. Um, some players have a lot of them. Ritchie doesn't have a whole ton of weaknesses. One of the things he runs into trouble is when he loses interest. You've seen a lot of clips where he's a really compelling live performer, but there are also times where he's not in the mood to be playing and he's kind of mailing it in live. Usually you get an okay performance, but it's not as energetic, or you can tell when he's not into it. And there are times he's refused to do encores and things like that. He just wasn't in the mood to do it, or was having a bad day or whatever.
Was that
Um,
from the beginning of when he first got big with Deep Purple, or did that
I
start
think it
showing up
became.
later?
I think he sort of grew into that as his stature became such that he could get away with it.
Right, just
Um,
the legendary rock star antics kind of stuff.
yeah, but I think he's one of those guys in rock and roll who's a volatile character. And there's of the live footage that's available, a lot of which we're showing in these clips today. There's a show from 1984, 83 or 84 in San Antonio with the Joe Lynn Turner lineup of Rainbow. And in my opinion, it is the best live performance they ever caught on tape or on film of Ritchie. He was absolutely into it that night, knowing that the cameras were running. He was really uh, doing everything he could to put on a great performance.
Which
And
performance
then
was that?
this was 1983 or four with Rainbow in San Antonio. It's called
Okay.
Live Between the Eyes. Now on the same tour, there's a film of them in Japan, in Tokyo, and he's nowhere near as interested in that concert. You can see it. He's not jumping around. He's not being animated. He doesn't have the same level of energy for whatever reason. I mean, it's hard to bring it every night for anybody, but you know, this is a man who was generally aware of when he was being filmed and tried to do, you know, better when he was being filmed. But there are times when he was less interested or having a bad day, and it showed. Some people, they don't let that show, you know.
Right.
Some people, they rise to that, and they just deliver an even performance. Blackmore was always kind of like, you know, if you get him on a great night, it's wonderful. If you get him on a disinterested night, it's still pretty good, right? The other thing is he was a fairly disinterested rhythm guitar player. We talked a little bit about this, but I'm going to read the quote that I put in the Alchemy profile, and it's from a 1978 guitar player interview where he said, "I hate to do rhythm tracks. They bore me silly." And although this comment was made in the context of laying tracks in the studio, the same can be said of Ritchie's live rhythm playing. In the same interview, he also states, "I love to have the freedom of just going on stage and playing whatever I want to play at the time. I'll play the numbers with which I'm supposed to play, but in the in-between parts, if I'm feeling good, I'll play something completely off the wall that I've never tried in my life." In other words, I just lay back for the vocal, and then when I do my bit, when it comes time to do the solo. I don't like to do intricate things in the backgrounds. I don't like clutter. I like the foundation to be simple. So this is what we were talking about a little bit earlier, where he's letting the keyboard and the song dictate what's going on during a lot of the rhythm parts of the verses and choruses and things. And then he'll wait when he has his moment, he'll go off and do a great solo or something like that. Or if it's a riff-based song, he'll play the riff, obviously. But there's a lot of times where he'll just, like, if you listen to the track Long Live Rock and Roll and you listen to the verses when Dio is singing, he's playing the kind of notes that a bass player would play. He's playing like a root octave figure or a root fifth octave figure where he's just playing single notes. He's not playing chords. So it's a different sort of style where he gets away with that because he always has a keyboard player in the band. If he didn't, it would sound really thin.
Right. But that also makes Deep Purple's and Rainbow sound pretty unique because
absolutely
the only real big band I know who has a keyboard like central as a big thing is the Doors, but that was, you know, earlier. Well, I guess you also had the Animals, but that's like 60s, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, you get a lot of synth stuff in the 80s and stuff, but I mean,
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You know, even if you compare it to a guy like Eddie Van Halen, when he was in the era of the keyboards, he was still playing classical rhythm guitar. You know,
right.
He's holding it down.
Were there any bands in the 70s in a similar style that were having a keyboard player as central and as
well, I guess you would. The obvious answer would be Emerson, Lake and Palmer, who never had a dedicated guitar player.
Right. Yeah.
And they so needed one. I mean, that would have been a very interesting band if they had actually had a killer guitar player in the band. But you know, Greg Lake was the guy who covered guitar and bass. You know, but it was really a lot about Keith Emerson. And then again, you have Yes with Rick Wakeman, but you have plenty of guitar and plenty of rhythm guitar in Yes with Steve Howe playing that stuff. So you're right. It's a very unique sound that you get when Blackmore's in the band because he leaves a lot of space where there would normally be rhythm guitar. The other thing he said in his interview was about why he never plays the same guitar solo twice. He says, "I have a very bad technical memory, so I can't remember. If I write a tune exactly what the notes are, it's really exasperating because I'll write one and that's great and I'll play it and record it and I'll play it again and oh dear, I've forgotten it. What did I play? It's really annoying." And that's from Trouser Press, 1978. So, you know, you have guys like Tony Iommi who almost always plays the same solo he played on the record.
Yeah.
And guys like Rush, they would play pretty much what was on the record.
Or the guys from the Eagles or...
Yeah, but in the era of that Ritchie came from, you know, you have, you know, that experimental era of improvisation. Zeppelin always did that too. They never played what was on the record. They, you know, they'd extend their numbers and go into long jams and things and, you know, completely stretch it out and make it different. And Ritchie was like that too.